Ryan.
Today, we are learning basketball with Spencer Davies, formerly of Basketball News, Close Up 360, currently covering the Cavs on SI, writing NBA work at the RG Media, Babcock Hoop Industry, does some incredible work breaking down film, writing about the NBA, covering Cleveland, who's off to an insane hot start to the season. Can't wait to jump into that. But first, I want to really pick your brain a little bit, get to know you as a writer, as an NBA thinker, basketball film watcher, and first things first. How you doing today, Spence?
I'm doing great, man. It's like I was telling you before we started recording. Finally got some time off. The Cavs, they just finished up the really long stretch of their schedule there in Miami. On Sunday, it was another 3-4. They only play, I think, 3 games in the next 10 days. So a little bit of rest, a little bit of recovery for the players, but also for the people that cover the team, like your boy here. So, I'm just doing some laundry, catching up on some errands, and then obviously preparing for the holidays. So that part has been nice, a little mental refresher, if you will, but also obviously paying attention to the NBA Cup and doing all that fun stuff too before we turn over to the new year.
Hey, I feel that. I mean, the league's a haul or a grind for anyone who covers it. Like especially for those like traveling with the team. I can only imagine. That's a lot of travel up and back, and then there's 41 games here at home over a couple months. That's a lot of games to keep track of and keep a beat on. So you're putting in work, no doubt about it. Well deserved break. And before we dive into the Cavs season, I thought we might hit on some of your work and just more generally your thinking process, whether it's writing or scouting. I was just kind of curious, first, what goes into your process when you're writing a story? Like, what are you looking for? What are you thinking of? What are you trying to like highlight when you're coming up with different basketball story ideas for either the Cavs or basketball at large?
Well, certainly it's not just myself. I'm like anybody that's in the NBA universe or basketball universe. I scour the timelines. I look for some certain, stats that pop out to me. I look for certain, highlights that pop out to me. I'm definitely a basketball junkie in the sense of I love the game. So the intricacies of the game very much so pop out. I'm not too versed in the terminology and stuff. Like I have a lot of people that are close to me just over the years who are coaches, who are people in front offices in non-NBA leagues and SIDs, and the world of basketball is so small that just when you pick the brains of everybody that you talk to over a 10 to 11 year period, you just get more and more kind of intrigued by everything around the game. So it's really just kind of everything that inspires the stories. I like talking to guys personally who are not quite yet at their breakout. If I could give you an example, like when I was writing for Sam Amico at Amico Hoops, he has Hoops Wire now, and that's where he does all of his, aggregation work and whatnot. But when we had Amico Hoops together, when I was fresh out of college or just in my later years of college, like I interviewed Giannis Antetokounmpo one-on-one. I interviewed Bradley Beal one-on-one. These guys were like just about to get to their, part where they're breaking out and they're in their prime. I kind of like try to pick out those guys. So this season, like for RG Media, I've done, exclusive features with like a guy like Jalen Johnson, who I think should be getting a ton of praise and reward right now from the general public for how he's playing. I talked to Christian Brown as my last feature for the Denver Nuggets when they were in town in Cleveland. So basically, if you really want to know what my kind of day is like when there's a Cavs game day, the morning I go to road shoot-arounds. I try to request guys who I want to interview. I see storylines. I see a player that I find intriguing, and I ask for one-on-ones through the PR teams. Sometimes I'll get lucky and, the agency's PR teams, will help me kind of facilitate that stuff. But that's just the morning portion. So I do that. And then when it comes to the Cavs game day portion of it, I do everything Cleveland for Cavs on SI. So this is the life of a freelancer that I'm trying to describe. Just gig work everywhere. I've done work with Matt Babcock, Babcock Hoops. I profiled Asa Newell for Georgia, one of the top freshmen in the country that's making waves right now. Like I just kind of get these ideas, and I think that I've done enough to where people respect my work. I wish that I did a better job of, kind of marketing that work. I try my best. It's not easy with algorithms on X and, not such a big following on Instagram, but I try to make my own graphics. I try to make, these stories look very, interesting as much as I can and try to get them seen as much as I can. But a lot of people just kind of see me doing the Cavs video stuff and just kind of probably assume that that's my niche, which it has a little bit of truth to it because I love doing what I do, covering the Cavs. I've completely shifted from not writing about them at all. I am just doing video storytelling in a way. Like I'm cutting up certain storylines and certain angles that people I either see on the timeline or they're asking me stuff in the mentions, and I just kind of splice them up that way from multiple perspectives. And I think I gained a little bit of respect over the last year or so because the questions that I asked Kenny Atkinson are more or less about the game more than a simple "how do you think this?" or like they're thought-provoking questions. And again, I can't take all the credit for every video that I post, but like I will signify when I have a curiosity. Like I asked him about why teams are so switch heavy. I've asked him, about 5-out offenses and if cutting is as valuable as spacing the floor. Those are things that I'm genuinely curious about. And I ask other coaches that stuff too. I might not post it as much, but just to kind of get a better understanding and do what I think, at least in my opinion, writers should do and media should do. And that's just to learn more about the game, and you can never stop learning about the game. So, that's that's 2 to 3 of the things that I do, and that's not even mentioning behind the scenes work I do for FanDuel Sports Network when teams are on the road or covering a hockey game or a baseball game. Like, so it's a lot. It's a lot, but I've found a good balance, I think, and I'm proud of the work I've done so far, for sure. And it's not bad to give yourself a pat on the back every once in a while because if you're not loving what you're doing and you're not proud of what you're doing, then why are you in the business in the first place? So that's probably I wouldn't call that a brief overview. I'd say that was a 5-minute kind of overview, but hopefully your listeners didn't mind hearing that.
Hey, no doubt. This is the right podcast to do it. I mean, it's all about. I mean, you hit on a ton of stuff that I find interesting, so I'm sure the listeners will too. Like,
yeah, and if you got any questions too, please fire away.
Yeah, we're trying to learn basketball here, and I actually just became a credentialed Orlando Magic media member. Like literally last week, I had my first
Congratulations.
game. Appreciate it, and those questions resonate. Trying to think of like creative, thought-provoking questions for the coaches, the players, something that they're not asked 50 times a year, or like in some form or variation, just to mix things up. And my highlight for me of the night was getting to ask Jalen Suggs about his pick and roll development and closing the game with the ball in his hands when that really hasn't happened a ton for him in the NBA level. And he's been more of an off-ball guy. He's been more of a handoff guy. And then finally he gets more of an opportunity to where they run 10 pick and rolls in the final 7 minutes of a close game, and Suggs closes the game out with pull-up threes and hitting layups, finding teammates and stuff. So that was a really cool kind of moment and experience personally, just to reach that level. And then, you hit on a ton of stuff. Obviously, for sure, Jalen Johnson. I mean, he's having a most improved level type of year. Like he deserves a shout out for his improvement, as especially his offensive scoring versatility has always stood out to me. Just like a lengthy forward with all these developable ball skills. And you're talking to an Asa Newell fan account over here. Like I'm probably too high on him. I got to see him at Mount Verde a few times. kind of doing some scouting
Stacked
reports.
Montverde team, by the way. My God, you see what Derek Queen's doing at Maryland, and you got obviously Cooper Flagg and Liam McNeely. Like you got just
It's
absolute juggernaut of a prep school there.
It's wild. I mean, you go through their like top six with those four, and then Rob Wright and Curtis Givens, and you got at least like four projected first round picks in next year's draft, all in a high school starting lineup together. Like that, it's going to end up right up there with any of these all time great high school teams that have also been at Mountford probably over the last decade or so. But they're an incredible program, just churning out great talent. And yeah, I mean, Ace Anuno's like defensive versatility, his length, his instincts really stand out to me. Like I think I'm higher than most people that I talk to. So it's cool that you got to talk to him yourself and
I'll send you that one.
get to know about. No doubt, I got to share that one. That's a no doubt right there. But just a lot of interesting stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's what also resonated was your grind as a freelancer, and it just being able to make a career out of that is interesting because it's not as maybe direct to clear a path as some might think, that you just write about basketball and that's all there is to it. Because there's a lot of people that write about basketball, myself included, that haven't quite made a full-time career out of it. So what kind of advice do you have for people trying to get into freelance basketball media specifically, whether it's making videos, writing stories, doing podcasts, all of that? What tips would you have, and what have you learned on your path so far?
Ooh, uh, be as versatile as you possibly can. Be able to be your own social media manager. Be able to shoot video, edit video. Be able to record your own podcast, edit your own podcast, post it, and then market it. Be able to kind of have reps with interview skills. I think that's another thing too. No one is ever too good for you to interview. I really like, some of my favorite stories over the years have come from G League guys or guys that aren't even in the G League, talking to people at lower level Euro League. There's so much basketball around the world, and that also plays into another piece of advice that I have, is that to always network. Your network never stops growing. That is so instrumental in, one, helping you become better at what you do and gaining better understanding, but also to be able to kind of find other stories and find other people to connect with, and you never know what they're going to lead you to. That I feel like is such an underutilized part of being in sports media in general, is just, you don't realize how small the world is. And the more your network expands, the more you realize that. But yeah, I'd say just be as versatile as you possibly can. Never get comfortable. I will say that too, because I did all of this after college. I was freelancing. I was working 3 to 4 jobs. And then I finally got my break. I was working at Basketball News, and I was a full-time employee for 2.5 years. And it was great. And then all of a sudden it just kind of was taken away from you, and you're back to square one. And that, I'm not going to lie, that definitely kind of hurt my confidence a bit, and that kind of made me question what I wanted to do. And it probably took about a year for me to get back onto my feet, like mentally, to realize how long I've been doing this, and how much my work actually can resonate with people. I do appreciate the positive reinforcement from anybody that sends it my way. It's really, kind of makes you realize that you do have an effect on people's lives, and you do have, a way to communicate with an audience and be that liaison between fandom and the players and the coaches. And that's what I try to be. I try to be the middle person. I try to be, that connection, that kind of, that rope. So yeah, no, I think my biggest piece of advice would be to never stop communicating, never stop networking, and to be as well-rounded as you can possibly be. Because for example, if you're hired for something and for one job, there's a good chance that another thing or another task that's attached to that, or you have to do multiple different things to like basically add on to what you initially thought you were going to do. So it's not easy. Like you said, freelancing is not easy. I think I've found a decent groove with it now, even though I carry 3 to 4 different titles at the moment. But I just feel like it's the only way you can really do things at the moment, because full-time work it's hard to find, and like you said, there are thousands of us trying to do this as a job and as a career. So it's not easy when, especially you don't have the drive. If someone doesn't have the drive, then it's going to be hard for you to make it here.
No doubt. I mean, I can relate to a lot of that grind and that path, and kudos to you for sticking it out and finding a niche that works for you, and maybe supplementing some of those roles with each other, so you build a good base of doing a lot of different work for a lot of different people.
Got to be able to self-market, guys. That's the big thing, man. Yep.
No doubt. And, to back to some of your stories a little bit, what do you look for when you're watching film? Like, are you looking for players? Are you looking for sets? Shout out to, all the, creative minds and coaches on Twitter, especially, where they'll just break down plays. And I'm probably similar to what you said, where it's not my strong suit knowing, like, I'll know the first action, but once we're like 4 or 5 words deep into a play call, you might have lost me a little bit. So you might have to break down what exactly is going on. But, I talked to Evan Gualberto. He does some of the best like film breakdowns I've seen on here. And there's so many, like Brian Gasinger as well, who covers the Hornets. He does some really cool ones where, they're Joe Hubert. I mean, they just all have so many great basketball minds, where, like you said, it's a constant learning process. And that's what I love about basketball. And back to the first episode talking, excuse me, with Jackson Frank, where like people can enjoy basketball at any stage of the learning process. Like, when you're a kid, you don't care about the details. You're just watching for dunks and the tough shots and your favorite player, hoping he gets 20, 30 points, and just enjoying the product for what it is. And then you grow up and you learn a little bit more of the game, either as a player or maybe from the coaching side or the analytics side. And there's just a ton of different ways to appreciate basketball at all these different levels. And when you feel like you've learned a lot, or maybe, I don't know if anyone ever masters it, but when you feel really comfortable in one aspect, you find out there's a whole other aspect you never even thought of before, of maybe how those players were set up this whole time, or what are the little advantages being created through a play call or through the teammates, or things that just aren't recorded in a box score. So, considering all those things, what are you looking for when you're watching film and coming up with these stories?
I'm looking for the why, if that makes sense. Like, why is it that Christian Braun is shooting above 68% in the restricted area? You look at, I'll just use that as an example. Like, I went through, like, from his last 5 games, just all of his points, and I was just kind of watching that, and I was noticing, a lot of these passes are coming from Nikola Jokic. So then that kind of goes into a web. Go to nba.com/stats, go into the player profiles. Holy crap. Jokic is passing to this guy, and he's been, for example, from that story, Christian Braun has been 2.6 assists of Jokic's average per game. And then, that kind of goes back to how film can lead you to the stats a little bit. And I don't want to be a stat merchant per se. Like, I feel like a good balance is good. Like, I don't want to be too coach heavy with the articles that I write and stuff like that, even though I appreciate that stuff. Like, you brought up Jackson Frank. I used to edit him. I used to edit Mark Schindler. I used to edit Nekias Duncan. I was on shows with Nekias and Mark, or sorry, not Mark, and Steve, on the Dunker Spot.
Shout out to the Dunker Spot. One of
right.
the best breakdowns doing it.
They were at the part of the Basketball News Podcast Network, so we did shows together. Like, those guys helped me understand a lot of stuff. But like, just when I'm watching the film, I'm looking for the why. I'm looking for play types, and like Christian Braun, amazing cutter, amazing in transition, just running the floor. Like, you can look back. Luckily, I have League Pass, so I can just watch full games back too if I don't want to just look at certain statistics. Like I did that for Jalen Johnson. Like before I interviewed him, I looked at like 3 of his games before that, and was just noticing how much of an athletic freak he was, but also how decisive he was. And that just kind of led me to, asking Quinn Snyder about that stuff. And then, Quinn ends up reflecting and telling me the why. And that just kind of, I think, helps those types of stories. With the Cavs, I feel like I don't have to watch too much film when I'm in person because like I feel like I have a decent feel for the game. I did not play for a high school or anything like that. I played rec. I played at the rec, all that good stuff. I can tell you my little brother, Cade Davies, he's at Capital University playing D3 right now.
All
And
right.
yeah,
Shout out,
so
little
like,
bro.
yeah, no, he was on ESPN Plus a couple weeks ago on a defensive possession. It was garbage time, but it was still cool though. And I mean, he cracked the rotation too. If I want to give me a little bit of give him a little bit of a shout on here, but we're basketball junkies, us two, and my dad same way. Like, and I think that I can see the game from a different lens because I'm seeing it from a media lens, but I'm also seeing it from my brother's lens. So I'm looking out for things. I'm like, oh, why didn't this guy set a pin down? Why isn't there any off-ball screens going on? Why can't you get an inbound in correctly? How is this being defended? Just those little intricacies and player tendencies too. Like I think if I was ever not to be in media, I think I would be in scouting more than the coaching element because I just know how hard that has to be a coach. Get guys in the right spots, get players in the right spots, and obviously all the terminology I said that I probably don't understand. But no, the film stuff, like it's more or less just using it as a guide more than anything and looking for the why for a certain thing. And again, like I told you before, this isn't all like my own brainchild. I'm constantly, looking around the league and coverage around the league and seeing these tendencies. And I'm just asking questions to the players doing it and the coaches who are, employing those standards and those sets and whatnot. So, but I think that the way that you frame questions and the way that you interview these people is very important too, because that's still something I'm trying to get better at. Probably do a good job 7 or 8 times out of 10. Those other 2, you might fall flat on your face and not know how to frame something that's in your mind, and that takes reps too. But yeah, I enjoy watching film in that particular way and just trying to find the ways that these players are using their skill sets, and not every one of them's the same either. That's another thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head for how I would generally talk about watching film as well. Where like, along with analytic tools, they can both be tools for scouting purposes and trying to understand the game, and like maybe this to compare it to the why or the how of something happening with the film. The what happened can generally be proven with some sort of statistic as well as an analytic tool. So you got the what one way and the how and the why another way. And you're not going to understand the whole picture just by looking at one or the other. And you kind of like learn a little more by combining those, and then to another level, understanding the personnel that's doing it, the coaches that are calling the schemes, and maybe tendencies for any of those players and coaches, and trying to balance it all into one good thought. And yeah, I can definitely relate. At least a very small sample size for myself. I've only had one day of asking interview questions, but trying to come up with questions that are thought provoking and also just coherent that coherent sentences that are actually representing like what you're thinking. Shout out Coach Mosley for giving me some grace on my first media question, where I don't think I made a mistake, but I probably was a little long-winded, just kind of rattling off some stats and stuff. So I guess that would be my next question is, what kind of balance do you find in the questions when you're asking a coach or a player something? Like, do you just shoot right to your question, or do you maybe set it up with some stats or some tendencies that you've noticed to kind of give the question some background in the first place?
Probably the second one. And sometimes you catch yourself in a loop Like literally when you're asking a question and then you sound like you are crazy.
Right.
I've done that a number of times to players where they're just kind of like, but you get better at it as you go, for sure. That part is kind of tough to get down, but you just got to be confident, and you can't try to be robotic about it. Like if you really like when you're starting out and you really want questions for an article or for a video that you're trying to do, like maybe jot some notes down on your phone or something like that. That's perfectly fine. But I feel like as you get more experience going along, that you learn the way how to talk to people in the NBA and talk to people in general about basketball, and I think they respect your opinions the more that you show. And also the other thing too, when if you were asking a follow up and someone's talking, they can tell when you're listening to their answer or if you're thinking about the next question. And that's another part that I think can help a young journalist, is just making sure that you got to be ready to go with the next one, because you don't know if a player is going to be short with their answer or long with their answer. That's another challenge. But if you're listening to what they're saying to you, then you can completely just go off the cuff and it turns into a talk more than an interview. And that's my favorite type of interaction with people, is when it's not such a formal process. It's just a back and forth, and you're just kind of bouncing off of each other, and they give you some really good material to work off of. And I think a lot more respect that than some of the stuff we see on the internet when they're trying to get I don't like the word clickbait, but I guess just kind of get a rise out of someone, or if there's quote graphics that are contextless and stuff like that. Like that's the stuff that bothers me. So I try to turn it more conversational. Put them at ease. I'm not trying to get you here. I'm legitimately trying to help you. I'm trying to get your work out there as best as I can, and for the world to see more of it, because you deserve it. You've been working at it. And that, I think, is the most rewarding part, is when, someone's family member or someone's, agent or something like that, like reaches out to you and gives you a pat on the back or says, good job. Like that's the most rewarding part, I think, about this. And, if I have ever played a part in my 10 or 11 years in helping someone get seen, or, a front office discover them or something like that, then I know that I've done my job well. And you feel good about that, because that literally leads to money and to contracts and whatnot. So like if you help that part of a person's career, then you've done a really good job, and it's commendable in my opinion, if you help a player along in their journey in that fashion.
Right. I mean, that's a great way of kind of describing what the media's role should be, especially for basketball media, where, it's not necessarily hard pressing journalism over some, world ending thing over around the world or something like that. Like, we're trying to talk hoops, and we're trying to make it a conversation between the people that are actually playing and coaching and formulating the teams to do so. And, I think that adding the perspective of those people in the huddle is as important as just adding our own perspective from the sideline or from the crowd, being able to just notice things from up there. It's like there's only so many ways to fully understand the whole story of what's going on, and nothing can really be better than getting the perspective of the people that are actually in there. And like you said, promoting what they're working so hard to do. I mean, this is their chance to talk about their work. They're the ones grinding athletically every day to get better, to develop little skills one day at a time that become, more important skills that they can actually use during a basketball game in front of millions of people watching. And, we're just trying to kind of bridge that gap between the fans at home that want to learn more and want to hear about what their players are up to and working on, and the players and coaches themselves. So, that's a great perspective in terms of that. And, I think it might be time for us to dive right into this Cavs season. The Cavs are on an absolute roll. They're throwing some stats at you that I'm sure you're already aware of. But for the listeners, the Had a 16-0 start. I believe it's the second best start ever, other than the 2016 Warriors that started 24-0. Their starting lineup rates seventh in net rating among all teams with 100 minutes. They're currently 21-4, I believe, with the third best point differential, beating teams by over 10 points per game. They rank third on offense, ninth on defense, and interestingly, it's because of two of the same four factors: shooting percentage and turnovers on both ends of the floor. They're stopping teams from scoring, they're forcing turnovers, and then they're scoring efficiently themselves. First in the league in scoring efficiency, and sixth in not turning the ball over, as in safe decision making on their part. So, when you watch them play, it looks like the ball is just whipping around, like everyone knows where to be and why they're there, and the roles are very clearly defined. They have the top four in place. Like I mentioned, a top 10 net rating lineup with the starters, with Mobley, Mitchell, Garland, Allen, and Okoro. And I think my first question is, what's different this year than years prior? Like, why if this is what they were expecting when they made all these big trades, what's finally clicking this year?
It'd be simplistic to say that it's just shot making. That's not the only thing that goes into this. They're playing faster. They're bringing the ball up with multiple ball handlers. They have set spots on the floor where they know to go to. I think it's been Evan Mobley's ball handling that's really kind of taken them to the next echelon. And he has allowed Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland to kind of become these off-ball threats that we haven't really seen too much of in the past. It's not so much 1-5 pick and roll anymore. It's small perimeter pick and rolls. And Kenny's seeing really good results from bringing in the team's worst defender sometimes and getting them onto their best offensive player. That, I think, has been huge. They've been a lot more apt to taking three-pointers in transition, catch shoot threes for the guards, guys in the corners. Everyone can go to the corner, really. Evan's been more, as of late especially, has a tendency to take some threes as well. Not that he's taking too many, but I mean, shoot, that game in Charlotte was a revelation. Shooting, he had 6 made threes in the first quarter and had 23 points, and that was a 41 and 10 game for him.
I saw that stat line. It was like the first since Kevin Durant, I believe, or maybe the only player other than Kevin Durant to hit the numbers that he hit that night between the threes and the scoring and I think the blocks.
Yeah, and he went between that and the Denver game, he went 9 of 13 from deep. So that's just another part of this that could be completely, blow up this offense. And you look at the guys off the bench that I think also deserve a ton of credit. Caris Levert, when he's been healthy, has been as efficient as he's been since his rookie year. And he is knocking down catch shoots. I think he's doing really well on the pull-up threes. Very little mid-range stuff. It's either rim or threes. It's very analytical heavy when it comes to Caris's approach. We'd be remiss not to talk about Ty Jerome. He's slowed down a little bit since he got sick, and teams started to kind of key in on him. But what an invaluable piece to have to bring off the bench, a 6'5" guard to either join Mitchell and Garland or spell one of them or have all three on the floor together, which Kenny's gone to in closing lineups before. But he's just had this knack of making steals in very high leverage situations. He's been knocking down threes. He's using his slow step to get to the rim and draw fouls and also use that floater. He's been passing the ball really well. You look at George Niang, who, even though he's not shooting his best, I think he's somewhere around 36, 37% on the year from deep. He has been really good at putting the ball on the floor and using a little push shot off of the high glass. He's also been a good connector on that end of the floor, just making that kind of next swing pass. And I think also defensively in certain matchups, like he struggles in times like, against the more athletic wings and the faster guys. But when you have bulkier guys that you have to defend, George is right there and he is just really a unit to try and get past. And he's really good at shuffling his feet. He's good at his rotations defensively. And I think he deserves a lot of love this year. Sam Merrill, not just being a 3-point shooter, he is now being used in screens and kind of taking attention off of bigs that set him for him. Whenever he goes out and flares to the outside, teams have to decide whether they're sticking with the guy he's setting a screen for or to go out to him and shoot, defend a three. So that kind of puts them in a no man's land situation. He's been driving and touching the paint a little more lately too, which means that he's been playmaking and also just making layups. And that's something that he really hasn't done too much of in the past. So, I would say their depth has been huge. The way that Kenny's been managing their minutes has really played into this too. I don't think anyone on their team is averaging more than 32 at the moment. And I know that's probably because of their fast start, and the blowouts allowed them to rest some of the guys at the beginning of the season. But still, on a heavy night for a guy minutes-wise is like 34, 35 minutes. And he's really, celebrating their depth. I think that in pinches, Jalen Tyson's been great. Defending, he's shown a commitment to that end of the floor. Offensive rebounding, all that good stuff. And then, Dean Wade, if he can stay healthy, I think they've lost one game with Dean Wade playing this season. So, there's that. And then, we didn't even touch upon the core four too much, but, and even Jarrett Allen, his roll gravity is helping these guys get a lot of shots from outside. And he's, been at a low shot attempts wise, but that's also just because of how, teams are defending the Cavs on the interior. But Kenny says they want to be a paint and rim team first and an outside team second. But you play and you get what the defense, you take advantage of what the defense gives you. And I think the Cavs have done that in spades this year. And they just they have a synergy about them and they know what they're doing. And the most important part of all this is that Donovan Mitchell, he's not taking a back seat, but he's allowing his teammates to grow. And if they've got it going, he doesn't need to, quote unquote, get his. If they don't have it going, then he knows when to step in and to lead from a scoring perspective. And I think he's been so committed defensively this year, the deflections, the steals, the rebounds, and also the playmaking and being the, quote unquote, Evan Whisperer, as the team is calling him this year. So that's, I think, the biggest, the biggest thing this year is just celebrating the depth. And they've altered their style, but they haven't changed their identity.
Right. I mean, there's a ton of good points to hit on. I mean, first of all, Evan Mobley, just finally hitting another ascension point towards his stardom. I never sold any Evan Mobley stock. I had him second on my big board. Almost should have had him just number one. I just kind of went with the consensus of Cade, like everybody else, I guess. But he was my favorite prospect that year. I mean, just the word unicorn gets thrown out a lot, but he is one of those guys. He can block shots, hit the three, but really what makes him special and what makes a Jaren Jackson special is bringing a little something more to the game, a little scoring versatility where if he can round out whether it's a post-up game or a mid-range game, 3-point game, along with all those, defensive instincts, you have a special two-way presence, like a true all-star, maybe even superstar in this league. And like you mentioned, he's blossoming as a kind of a grab-and-go point forward almost at times where you haven't really seen that before. He might have been a point guard growing up with a late growth spurt, like one of those type of players. I kind of forget if that is his story or not, but I believe he used to play some point. And we're just finally kind of seeing that where, you're surrounded with all these shooters. He's a downhill force himself. So why not just grab the ball and go and try to kick out and find an open man? And I know that happened countless times, like you mentioned, corner shooters like Caris Levert perfectly. It seems like all these guys really have found their role and they're just in a very well-defined role that they're either perfectly suited for or overqualified for, and they've all accepted it. And Caris Levert being a six man, he's a bucket getter and if he's focused on efficient shots at that, the whole team at the rim and from three and at the free throw line, I mean, that provides real value. Levert, Okoro, Ty Jerome, are all shooting over 46% from three this season. I mean, that's like shows me that it's not just individual skills, like it's also the team, the setup, the schemes, getting them good looks where they're able to hit open threes at a high percentage, and that all kind of feeds into each other. Shout out Ty Jerome, like you said. I mean, he's just shooting bonkers, lights out, dominating second units and the impact metrics. I want to say he was a top 10 impact guy to start the season. Obviously, a small sample size, but like just shows how hot he really has been from deep, and then making plays defensively as well. There's so many interesting talents here that you could talk about. Donovan Mitchell, 24 points a game on 9 threes, 41% from downtown. And that maturity and decision making really stands out, like you mentioned, where he's not trying to dominate as a scorer every possession. He's picking his spots, taking over when the team needs him to, and kind of playing within the flow. Watching him against the Nuggets a couple days ago, I mean, he's just making plays all over. He had a chase down deflection to stop a fast break. Then he gets a steal on the very next play and pushes the ball up. He's playing, some connector passing, looking for shooters, not forcing the floater or a tough mid-range pull-up when there's an open man around. Like very much accepting kind of that lead team captain type of a role that is looking for the team first, while also knowing he's one of the most talented, tough shot making guards in the league and has been for a while, and he can get his just about any moment. And then, Darius Garland, I'm sure we'll talk about him for a minute. 21 points a game, almost in the 50-40-90 club, 49-42-94, shooting 62% true shooting as an undersized, smaller guard type. Like that's a pretty rare combination of just insane scoring efficiency for a guard. So, you got to love that. And then Jarrett Allen has been kind of that steady hand, it feels like, for a long time, where what he brings. He was a all-star level play going back to Brooklyn, where he actually played with Kenny Atkinson and as his coach. And he's just been steady rim protection, rim rolling, rebounding, playing that role about as well as any player really can in the league. And he's going to bring that vertical gravity, kind of suck some defenders into the paint and just kind of open things up for everybody else, and almost goes unheralded or underrated in a sense in the way that, the value he brings to a winning program. So, I was wondering if you think some of that experience has shown up with Kenny Atkinson playing, coaching Jarrett Allen before, and also just what you make of Darius Garland so far this year.
So Kenny knows Caris and Jarrett very well. And I think that his number one goal with Caris was to make him as efficient as possible. And so far, passing with flying colors. With Jarrett, he's got Jarrett playing a little less high pick and roll than Cavs fans are used to seeing him play. He talked about this the other day, was just that he has him more in the high quadrant. He's not always just sitting in the dunker, moving him around a little bit more. And that kind of opens some space for driving lanes. And we've seen that with Evan Mobley especially, kind of face up and attacking and finding the mismatches and whatnot. I think defensively, Kenny values Jarrett a lot. He's actually used him more in switching this year, not just being a rim protector, but also letting him kind of go out into the perimeter and get one-on-one with guys, pretty much 1 through 5, I would say. So I think those two, they know how Kenny coaches. They have responded to how Kenny coaches. And Kenny's also learned from his past experiences too, to double down on strengths rather than to look at weaknesses and try to improve those, which I thought was an interesting piece of mind that we got from Kenny in the press conference last week. As far as Darius goes, he's just playing with a clear mind. He dropped a ton of weight last year after the jaw injury. He had personal loss on top of that. And he just was not himself from the moment he came back and on. He was playing catch up the whole time. His shooting numbers weren't great. His defense was, kind of down just because he lost weight and he could get overpowered and all that. This year, Darius, I think, you look at the offensive numbers and you say, yeah, those are really nice. I think defensively, that guy's been as good as pretty much any Cav. Just as far as taking the challenge goes, he's switching on to Jason Tatum. He's switching on to Jimmy Butler now, and teams are trying to hunt him. But Kenny has actively said that they're not going to hide Darius Garland on defense, and they'll accept early switches with Darius because they believe in his ability to kind of stay stout, stay in front, but also just to make sure that those guys know that he's there. And they're willing to give up, I think, at least, those types of twos rather than some of the guys who are going to hurt you from deep more. And that, I think, is an interesting defensive strategy. I also think that this is helping Darius's confidence for when this happens in the playoffs, that, okay, I can switch onto these guys and I've done this before and I know how to react when it happens, because that, I think, is the most important. I think off ball, Darius is playing really good too defensively. When guys like Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade are playing on ball and forcing give ups, like Darius has been intercepting a ton of passes this year and playing passing lanes really well. Caris Levert's been doing that too. Donovan Mitchell's been doing that too. They've found a really good formula and just kind of forcing bad passes and bad give ups or bad shots. Which it's not easy when you're getting your shot altered by either Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen too. So they have a lot going on that end of the floor, but DG on offense, I mean, he's just got more freedom to shoot the ball. I mean, he's always had that freedom. I shouldn't say that. He's been more aggressive shooting the three. He's been more aggressive when he's turning the corner. He's looking like that all-star version of DG where you don't know whether it's a floater or a lob, or if he's going to go off high glass, try to, draw a foul. Cavs are first or second in drives the last time I checked. They're not getting the foul calls that they want. And that goes for Darius Garland and Donovan and even Caris Levert. Those guys have mentioned it before. Kenny's mentioned it before too. But Darius is just complete package right now, and the way he's slinging it, he's shooting it, getting his team involved. Gotten used in screens in situations sometimes. Just a lot more imaginative on the part of Kenny and putting him in possessions to succeed.
Man, just finally finding that perfect floor balance. It's super exciting to see these four like just clicking at such a elite level and surrounded by spacing, all really, buying into the defense, like you mentioned, and actually giving their all on both ends every play to the point where, like I mentioned before, I mean, they're ranked top 10 on both sides of the ball and forcing turnovers, getting stops. And that shows up in their effort and their willingness and probably their confidence as well as scorers and shooters, just all kind of feeling a shared green light to get the shots up anytime they feel like they have a good look. And, you can't say enough about this Cavs team. You think, maybe they could be good enough to get 3 All-Stars off this team? You think there's a chance? We used to see that. I don't know if we'll see it anymore, but what do you think? How many All-Stars are we looking at?
Well, with Franz Wagner going down,
That's big.
yes. I could see that. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't looked at Evan Mobley's counting stats. I do think that obviously Donovan Mitchell will be considered and probably the most likely. I think Darius Garland should be an all-star at the moment. Like you said, almost the 50-40-90 club right now. That kind of hard to keep him out of it. I think Evan's the wild card though. And that's going to depend on, they do forward guard now. They don't do big anymore. Like it's a weird process now. But I think they certainly have 3 all-stars. And when Jarrett Allen is on and when they need him to be on, I think that he is also all-star caliber. Right. But obviously the field goal attempts are down. His counting stats are down. He's still rebounding the ball, even though Kenny wants him to be better on the offensive glass. But that's probably not going to happen. So I could see them getting 3, though. I mean, and especially if you have the top record, I don't see how you can't get that consideration. I think at minimum they have to.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like we've seen it before where, and especially like LeBron Cavs teams going back in the day would get all 3 of those stars out on there. So would be special and well deserved. And yeah, I asked if they would have three just to give a nod to Jarrett Allen because he plays at that level as a big man, even if he doesn't get the box score stats necessarily that the average fan would vote for. But I'm sure he gets the respect from the coaches for doing all that. And you know, they're doing all this without Max Strus. Like he's about to have a season debut around the corner, I believe. So what do you project his role to be? Will he just slide right into just another kind of bench shooter option for this team, or will he maybe take over the Okoro spot in the starting lineups depending on the game?
So it started out with Dean in that 3 spot, and then it turned into Isaac, and then Ty Jerome got in there. It's been kind of find the 5th member to surround the core 4 with. I think that Max fits in seamlessly here. I don't know how quickly that's going to happen. I don't think that he'll immediately be a starter, but if we've seen how Max plays with the core 4, he's been, I think, an underrated playmaker, especially with a secondary creation. I think defensively, he's been really solid and aggressive. And he's obviously somebody who likes to push the pace. It's almost like he's in the ilk of a Sam Merrill, just a bigger body. He doesn't have quite as quick of a release as Sam does, but we know he's a movement shooter. We know he can attack off the dribble, and he's a good pocket passer, too. That's another part of this team. I think he's just probably second behind Darius Garland or even Donovan Mitchell as far as those bounce pocket passes, if they decide to go that route or if, they're spraying out. But I'm interested to see if Max is in the corners. I want to see if he's in dribble handoffs with Evan. They were talking about that not this past training camp, but the training camp beforehand, about how Evan and Max could mirror Bam Adebayo and Max and how that combination worked in Miami. I think Strus coming off of those DHOs could be a huge weapon for Evan, especially now that he's creating a lot more. He's got the ball in his hands when he's bringing it up. I'm sure that Kenny's going to have Max bring it up in certain situations, and you'll have Evan and Darius and Don off the ball. Like, that's what I think allows Kenny's teams to be successful, is that multiple ball handlers is what's required nowadays. And that's kind of just modern NBA now. You can't just have the traditional, okay, this is your point guard, this is your big, this is how we run things. That's not how it goes anymore. Everyone's got to be able to do different things. They've got to be multifaceted. They got to be multi-skill set. And I think Max, fits right into all of that. He's not just a specialist. He's got a lot of talent, and he's been to the finals before. He's got playoff experience, and that's just adding a starting caliber player, almost like a trade deadline acquisition for Cleveland. So, So I know Grant Afseth was the first one to report for RG Media that Max would be back in the Cavs lineup on Friday for the first time to make his season debut. All I got to add to that is that from people I've talked to, is just they wanted to see him get through live practices and see how his body reacted first, because he practiced with the Charge, the Cavs G League affiliate, over the weekend. But he is, slowly gotten back into the contact portion of it. And it seems like Friday is the day. And if Friday's not the day, it certainly will be by Monday. So they just want to see how his body reacts the next couple of days before they make that official determination. And it'll be exciting. It'll be exciting to see Max get back into the fold. And I know he's probably, chomping at the bit to get into this place and be a part of such a fun start to the season that the Cavs have had.
Absolutely. That sounds like a kind of a natural comparison from Max's old team with the Heat and Bam Adebayo's proficiency for handoffs, Evan Mobley's development as a playmaker. And what's really interesting, what you said, is opening up opportunities for Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell to play off ball, to attack some closeouts, to have some shots where they don't have to create every advantage themselves. They're going to be attacking a defense that has already bent towards the shooting gravity of Strus, or the rolling gravity of Jarrett Allen, or Evan, maybe a short roll to Evan Mobley, and he's kicking out to one of these guys. And that's what could really make them scary, because like you said, like it pretty much every team just about has to be able to have multiple ball handlers, multiple shooters, guys that can dribble, pass, and shoot and defend their own position, multiple positions, help defense. Like, everyone's got to do everything nowadays and pretty much be ready at all times. maybe not in the regular season, but those holes or flaws might get kind of pointed out and taken advantage of the farther you go along in the playoffs. And speaking of the playoffs, if you saw my face light up a few times, I think I have this big monitor here. I was pulling up some of the box scores for the Magic Cavs last year. It's what everybody wants to hear about, especially tuning in here, is the first round series between the Magic and the Cavs. But it was really a great kind of back and forth series, like a couple blowouts here and there. I was able to go to Game 3 and Game 6 in Orlando, so I caught two good wins for Orlando in person. And from the Magic perspective, it was awesome to see kind of just dip their toes in the water of the postseason. You had Paolo drop a 31-point game in one game, and then a 39-point game in another game. I believe that was, I just checked it too. I think, let's see here. It was a 39-point game in Game 5, which they actually lost, but then a 31-point game in Game 3, which was his playoff home debut, and it was also Jalen Suggs' home playoff debut, who had 24 points. And those were literally two of the top 4 home playoff debuts of all time for Orlando in terms of the most points scored. Only Jameer Nelson and Shaq were also in that mix. And anytime you're on a list with Shaq, you're doing something right as players. And both of them actually scored as much or more than Shaq in his playoff home debut. So some cool fun facts from that playoff series. And then Franz kind of threw his big punch in game 4 with 34 points of his own. And he kind of gets killed for the last thing that anyone remembers of the season, the Game 7, where he took a lot of shots and did not score very many points. I want to say Paulo also had some lows a little earlier in the series where he only scored I just had it here. He only scored like 9 he had 9 points in Game 4 and 9 turnovers in Game 1. So like he also had a couple lows himself, but the team is able to make up for it with some balance. And at the time, Orlando does, and to this day, Orlando doesn't have a ton of 3-point shooting. They're super reliant on their stars getting their buckets, getting 20, 30-point games, drawing a lot of fouls, and hoping for a rock fight where it comes down to the defense and the turnovers that they can force. And, that is super effective in the regular season, and it got them to the playoffs. And it can just be maybe a little hard to rely on consistently night to night, not having kind of that 3-point wild card of our stars didn't show up necessarily on offense, but the team hit 15 threes. So at least we had an actual like shot to win this game. So, from the Magic perspective, it felt like they were knocking on the door. The Cavs were dealing with quite a few injuries, but you could tell some of the Cavs were super special. I mean, Donovan Mitchell just felt like you were going up against a heavyweight fighter superstar in that series. Like he could not find a shot he couldn't hit, and he was probably the big takeaway from the Cavs. So, what would you take away from that series, that playoff run for Cleveland, and what do you think might be a little bit different this year with all this kind of newfound depth and chemistry and good health for that matter?
I think that Orlando defended them really well. They obviously got off to that in that Game 7. They got off to that great start in the first half, and then the Cavs willed themselves back into it. Like you said, Donovan Mitchell. You get a lot of what changed over the offseason from that, I think, and from the Boston series. That we have to understand too that Jarrett Allen was hurt at that point, and Caris Levert and even Donovan Mitchell in the Boston series, the wear and tear that affected them was big. That was probably another thing they had to consider. But the biggest part of this was just being imaginative and not just one-dimensional offensively. And that's what they've, like we've been talking about, have done, being able to attack you in multiple ways. The Cavs are adaptable now. They can beat you in a slow-paced game in a half-court setting. They can beat you if you want to run up and down like crazy for 48 minutes. See the game against the Bulls twice. You can, kind of find that middle ground pace too if they need to. They have so many different speeds they can go at and they're comfortable in their own skin and their own pace. And they can dictate it too if they really want to. Like defensively, if they're turning you over, it's going to be hard to beat them. If they're knocking down their threes at the rate that they've been putting them up at, it's going to be hard to beat them. So the way that you can, I think, affect them at the moment, maybe, is on the rebounding edge. And I don't think you're turning them over right now, but you can get them to foul you. You can get them to, you can get rebounds against them for sure. At least on the offensive glass, I think. And that's really pretty much their Achilles heel are those two things. So like the thing they've gotten better at is just the execution, the shot quality has been so much better from that time on, and just being versatile and being not as predictable. And I think that is a big part and reason why they're taking the step that they have.
Yeah, I mean, just having all these different options for their offense is tough to guard, and when you combine their two-way balance, these top end stars, the big men that they're able to roll out, like two of the best defensive big men in the league with two of the best offensive guards in the league, and surrounding them with shooting, and they're all also showing up on the other ends that might not be their specialty. And just to put in perspective of some of their top guys, I looked up the dunks and threes EPM ratings real quick. Evan Mobley ranks 10th in the whole league on the season on EPM, estimated plus minus. He's plus over 1.5 on both ends and in the 99th percentile defensively. So you have a defensive anchor that's also super positive impact on the offensive end. And then Darius Garland is tied for AD for 16th in EPM on the season. He's in the 99th percentile offensively. You got Donovan Mitchell right behind him, tied for 23rd EPM in the 92nd percentile offensively. I didn't quite get to Jarrett Allen, but I'm sure he's around here somewhere. High, and Ty Jerome has been, off the charts in pretty much all these impact metrics. But just to give a quick shout to one of the better impact metrics that are publicly available, dunks and threes, Taylor Snare and his website, and the EPM metric that just tries to capture winning impact, two-way impact, and just kind of shows that you have two offensive stars that you can rely on, and Evan Mobley is a rising playmaker in the front court who can make life even easier for those guys, get them better looks, and take the ball out of their hands a little bit. But it's commendable that they can be that level of scorer and be willing to play off ball, because that's not the case for every star that's out there. There's a lot of guys that only want to hit pull-up threes that will literally take the open catch and shoot and dribble it once or twice so they can take their pull-up three. And maybe it's a rhythm thing, but beyond that, it's like just take the advantage, take the open shot. And it's a shout out to the front office for finding these personnel, these players that are willing to do that. And then the players, of course, themselves actually being willing to kind of take a step back, not worry completely about their numbers. And maybe with that much collective talent, they realize, if we all look out for each other, we're going to get our numbers and win games. And that's when the beauty of building a basketball team at this level can really flow so seamlessly. So, the Cavs have to be taken seriously as a contender, especially with the way the Bucks are bouncing back a little bit, but had a rough start. The Sixers, who knows what's going on over there? Let's just say it's injuries for now, but that they haven't cracked 10 wins yet, so that's not looking great. So the Cavs are right up there with any team in the East, obviously so far this season. And I think that playoff experience, the continuity, the chemistry, and then the top end star talent, playing top 10 basketball on both ends of the floor, having 3-point shooting. I mean, they just have just about everything you can ask for in a formula for success, for building a contender that has a legit chance to win it all. So, we'll see if they can do it. We're going to enjoy the ride along the way. It's not all necessarily about just who holds it at the end, but obviously that's the ultimate goal. So we're going to enjoy the journey of how they get there, and then let's see him pull it off, because all these guys deserve to get that final ultimate goal achieved. So any kind of parting thoughts on what you think is possible for this Cavs team, where you think they can end up with their season, and more generally, I know we touched on the league, but anything else that has caught your eye this season, whether it's a player or a team, or just anything that interests you following and covering the league.
I'll start with the Cavs. I think that at the beginning of the season, and I'm not an expectations guy. I hate that. I hate because it just kind of ruins everything for I feel like it's a fan ruining thing. Because then if you set yourself up for failure and they don't get there, then you're just like, well, it was a failure of a season, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They've made incremental growth every season. They've gone from the first round to the second round. Logically, their next step is a conference finals. And I think that the conference finals is what you have to meet, especially now you've given yourself no excuse. You've started the season out 21-4. You are playing some of the best basketball in the NBA. That needs to translate to the playoffs. Those are the habits that you have to build right now. You can lean back on the experiences of being down 15, playing with a lead, any sort of scenario that you've encountered in the first quarter of this season, you need to be able to rely on when it comes to April and May. So I feel like that is a fair benchmark for them, is conference finals or bust at the moment. I feel like they have the talent to get to an NBA finals. Boston is hard. I understand. They've got the wings that everyone talks about, but everyone can shoot. They take 50 a game. They have multi-tooled players. They're connected defensively. They have the best backcourt in basketball defensively. Jason Tatum is on a rampage at the moment because of the Olympics. Jaylen Brown is an incredible talent. They are stacked. That's true. But I feel like the Cavs feel they have that same amount of talent. It might not be the same wing heavy talent that everyone else has, and maybe that's something they address, to combat that. But I think conference finals is your benchmark, and that I feel like is something that they're capable of. And they've felt heartbreak in 2 straight years. I mean, it wasn't quite as bad as the first year where they got trounced by the Knicks. They showed improvement last year, and this is a group that's been together now for a couple years, and they understand what's necessary and what it takes. And there's really no excuse to when it comes to the playoffs not to be prepared for it. That I think is the standard they have to hold themselves to, and I think that they will. As far as thoughts on the NBA in general, like I don't really have too much. I'm gonna be paying attention to the Cup. I gotta shout out your Magic though, man. I admire the hell out of that team. I really do. I mean, how many shots can you take? First you start with Paolo. Then Franz gets on a roll and he's playing at an MVP level, and then he goes down with the same exact injury as Paolo. And then you watch last night, and Jalen Suggs has the bothersome wrist, and he's playing through it, and he's trying his best. I interviewed Anthony Black earlier in the season. He's going to have a lot more on his plate, and I think that he's shown it in spurts that he's able to play make, and that defensive presence, and the way that he's got his athleticism. He's got to work a little bit more on some stuff consistently offensively and not turning the ball over. But I've really enjoyed watching Anthony Black play. I think guys like Tristan Da Silva are going to have to step up to the plate. Mo Wagner, Jet Howard's been getting playing time. We know what Cole Anthony can do, and he was kind of buried in the rotation. But now it's like, hey, Cole, come on up and do what you did for us over the years. So I really admire Jamal Mosley and the standard he's set in Orlando. It's been really a fun thing to watch. You mentioned the Bucks. I mean, Giannis is playing out of his mind right now. We know Nikola Jokic is playing out of his mind. And just doing the Christian Brown story, just looking at Nikola's numbers and then just watching the film, it's just like, this guy's such a juggernaut right now. It's the Thunder, watching them last night. I think it's clear and obvious that they found their missing pieces in Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. Even with Chet Holmgren out, they've been terrific, and they have so many different ways to attack you and hurt you. There's some good basketball going up at the top of the conferences right now. Some teams still scuffling a little bit and trying to find their way, but that's natural for mid-December. So be paying attention to the rest of the season. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Ryan. It was a pleasure to be on. If I could just do a quick plug for my stuff, if I didn't do it enough at the beginning, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spin Davies. I have a podcast with my colleagues at Cavs on SI. It's called Courtside with Cavs on SI. You can find that on YouTube. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. Like, subscribe, rate, review. Please, please, please get that thing going. I do my NBA work at RG Media. You can follow me over there at rg.org. Babcock Hoops, Hoop Industry, everywhere. You can just look and find my work. And hopefully it does something for you to make your days better.
Hey, you got to follow Spencer. He's everywhere, as he said. He does some incredible work, just covering the league in general, and obviously the Cavs. And to note on what you said, like, yeah, I think that experience and viewing it as an ascension towards contending instead of championship or bust makes the journey a lot more enjoyable, and not letting expectations just ruin everything of, there's only one way this turns out good, because like you said, maybe there are some growing pains. Maybe they didn't have as much shooting and chemistry that first year. Maybe they were a little beat up last year. Maybe it's a bad matchup having to play Boston at the peak of their powers as well, because Boston is built in this league and in the East as kind of the king. They're the if you're gonna come for the king, you better take them out. So that it's a tough matchup for anyone. But I think the Cavs are right there with anyone else in the East. I mean, the Knicks obviously added a lot of stars, but and two-way balance to their floor balance. But they're new and kind of the first year together. Will that translate immediately to the playoffs? We'll see. And obviously, I'll take all the love and shout outs for Orlando. I mean, you can't. I'm always down to talk some Magic hoops. I mean, the defense has been gritty. The energy and culture that Jamal Mosley has set here is just unlike, honestly, any coach. I've been a fan for the team for 20 years before I started also writing and covering and doing videos on the team for the last 5, 6, 7. And it's just a different tone that has been set here, where you can throw on a Magic game and know that this team is not going to give up until the final whistle. Doesn't matter what the score is. Doesn't matter if they're down 20 and things are looking bleak. They'll throw the second unit in there if the energy isn't right, and they'll fight their way back into it, make it a little 10, 12-point game for the starters to take one more crack at it. So you got to love what he's been doing. And, they're 17-10, missing one of their key stars pretty much the entire way, other than the first 5 games or so. So Paolo should be back soon, and we'll get to see kind of him without Franz for about a month, and then hopefully we get both of them back healthy here, and we get to see what this team really looks like with both of them healthy for a long stretch. And you never want to say an injury is a blessing, but hopefully the opportunity to maybe play without each other and build some more experience for everyone else turns into a blessing of disguise for some of the development and experience for some of the other guys to get more touches. You mentioned Anthony Black, Jalen Suggs, just giving guys more on-ball touches, more creation experience, so that when their number is called upon in big moments, they've just made those reads a handful more times, where maybe it becomes even that much more valuable. So, they would love to see them take a step. And, for them, it's just pretty much winning a playoff series now and seeing how far they can go. And, hopefully getting a decent matchup in the first round where that's a little more possible. And that's a good goal to have. So, what's cool to me is the continuity, the chemistry, the experience of these teams, the journey to the championship, and, finally achieving that ultimate goal, and hopefully getting there again the next season and trying again, a few months later. So that's the journey of the NBA. But I really appreciate you hopping on today, Spencer. It's been a lot of fun getting to know you and and hearing about your work, your process, writing stories, breaking down film, making videos, covering teams and players, and just hope you know that your grind is appreciated. Like you're out here doing the work, you're out here doing the work for a lot of different people, and you're making a living off of it, and being able to contribute to coverage for fans to enjoy the game in different ways, and for players and teams to get their message out and their stories out, which is always a cool part of the player development process, and covering the sport that we all love to cover. So appreciate you, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you a lot. Pretty much. I think I truly appreciate it. And hopefully, again, if it affects anyone in a positive way, then I'm very, very grateful, very happy for that. So thanks for the opportunity, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
You know it. Have a good one, Spence.
You too.
With Ryan.
Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.